We are inundated with data today. In fact, studies suggest that there will be, over the next 5 years, there will be 10 times as much collected as we have today. So there's a huge challenge of dealing with all this data and trying to make sense of it all. And while Unalytics produces great-looking dashboards, those dashboards really serve two purposes. One is for aesthetics and making reports look more attractive, but by far the more important component is for better insights and to gain new knowledge. And to do that, we really need to make sure that we're measuring and looking at the right things when creating dashboards. And Unalytics offers a dashboard design approach, a methodology, which follows 5 rigorous steps. I'm not going to go through that today, but the first one is critical for this discussion in that it encourages us to look at the 1 or 2 metrics that we need to focus on in our dashboard when we're creating it. And the best way to do that is through KPIs. And it's really not a secret that KPIs are an effective way of measuring traffic and conversion. So what are we going to measure? Well, analysts now spend about 90% of their time looking at reports for page views and number of visitors. And we need to ask ourselves, is that really worth measuring? And the answer is, getting more visitors really isn't the fundamental goal of an organization. We want more conversions. And conversions don't just exist or aren't only found in e-commerce applications, but in fact all sorts of conversions exist, including filling in a form, downloading a document, or submitting a question. So how do we measure conversions? Well, the best way to do that is through key performance indicators. And a KPI then should rapidly and quickly and succinctly show us the progress of our goal and objective. It should require very little or no interpretation. You should be able to look at the number and right away know how you're performing, and it needs to be actionable. We need to be able to see the number and understand fundamentally what we need to do differently. So how do we define KPIs? Well, let's first look at what are not KPIs. Those are things like number of visitors, customers, sales revenue, sign-ups, and so on, or often looked at top 10 lists like top 10 page views or videos or downloads or even customers. These are not KPIs because you don't know how your business is running just because you know how many downloads you had last month. So the acid test might be, would a new employee understand the number? So if you had a new employee come in and said, hey, guess what? We had 43,000 downloads last month. That wouldn't mean anything because it's not put in any kind of a calculated number or put in perspective. And so we need to do that. So what are the KPIs? Well, we call these the wrappers. The rates, averages, percentages, and ratios. So it might be the rate of form fills, or the average rating per article, or the percentage of those who submitted a question, or the ratio of registrations to visitors. Of course, if we get more visitors, we'll likely get more registrations. And if that ratio stays the same, that they both double, visitors and registrations, the ratio will remain the same, which means, yes, we brought more visitors to the site, but the website itself was not converting. It wasn't causing us to get more registrations. We just had more volume. So the ratio is what we want to look at. And we always need to look at these over time. So how are we to determine the KPIs themselves? Well, the challenge is organizations typically hold lots of meetings day after day to define KPIs, but they often lack impact or clarity, and people just don't buy into them. We get stuck with things like top 10 pages or customers or most frequent reports. but they're numbers that no one really understands. Often we don't know how those numbers were ever determined in the first place or what the source was, and they didn't participate, so they just don't buy into it. And the KPIs need to be actionable. So if it's a metric that doesn't change how you behave, it's a bad metric. So let's look at the KPI methodology. It's a formal process that helps organizations and teams in situations where it's often huge and vast amounts of information, where people have personal viewpoints that may be different than others, and where the data is subject to interpretation. So the KPI Carta is a framework for deriving KPIs, and it's universal in application. It doesn't matter what the industry is, the type of business or organization, and it tends to bridge sort of that communication gap that exists between business teams, IT, and analytics teams. So if you look at the KPI hierarchy and where a KPI fits in, the bottom level are the various measures. These are the raw numbers and data points that come out of the reports, web analytics reports, customer databases, email marketing, and so on. As we slice and dice those measures, we arrive at metrics. And these are the relationships of those measures. And these are the four wrappers: rates, averages, percentages, and ratios. Some of those metrics, and you can imagine there would be an unlimited number of metrics, some are important enough to tell us how our business is doing. They are our KPIs. And above that, we have critical success factors, or CSFs, and these are items or things that are vital for a strategy to be successful. And above all are the goals and objectives. And this is the high-level goals and objectives set by management. And indeed, this hierarchy follows an organizational structure corporately, where upper management, middle management, analytics teams, technical staff, and then the analytics data itself. The challenge is figuring out what the KPIs are by looking at the hierarchy is not usually possible. So the KPI Carta turns this upside down. And we start by analyzing goals and objectives. They in turn drive the critical success factors, which inform us of KPIs, but to do the calculation of those, we start from the bottom. We look at the measures, they drive metrics, some of those are KPIs, and that's how they're then calculated. So KPIs are driven by business goals, but they're constructed from measures. And this tends to be a convergence then of business and technology. And let me use an example. Let's say that our objective is to increase sales. Well, our critical success factor then might be to increase leads by 25% in the next 12 months. And a CSF always has those two components. It always has a measurable finite amount that we can track, and it has a time frame in which that needs to be accomplished. So the critical success factor says if we increase leads by 25% in the next 12 months, we're probably going to meet our objective of increasing sales. It's never guaranteed, but if we're tracking that number of leads and it's increasing, we're probably going to hit the sales numbers. The other one might be to identify and increase by 50% high-quality lead sources in 12 months. The KPIs then become conversion ratio of visitors to leads, average leads per refer, or lead source quality ratios. And the numbers we have to work with are all the various measures you find in your verbose reports. Number of visitors, refers, lead score, etc. As we slice and dice them, we get various metrics. Some of them, like the PDF downloads by registered visitor, is not important enough to be a KPI, but it is a metric nonetheless. Another example might be decrease support services costs. I know that my cellular provider doesn't even want me usually to find their tech support section on their site, so they would rather that I find the answer myself online as opposed to call the call center. But if we're going to try to decrease that, we might look at decreasing the support calls by 20% in 12 months, or reduce per call cost by 15% in 12 months. The KPIs then might be the ratio of call center calls to online support, or self-service registration per visitor, so we want that to increase, or we want to look at the cost per calls over time. The measures, again, are all the various measures we find in our reports and in our call center calls, and it could be from CRM systems, etc. And as we slice and dice, we get metrics. Some are important enough to be KPIs. Now let me share with you a real live example we did with a client early in 2013, and this was part of the reason why we started to change the way the KPI Carta was delivered. So we do a lot of these workshops with clients where we work with them interactively to figure out what their KPIs should be. And in this case, and with many cases, it was confusing and a little bit challenging to use the simple model that I just described. So in this case, the business goal and objective was to increase revenue. All right, pretty straightforward. And this was set by the management during their annual review, looking at their current online marketing strategies to address the fact that their print demand was decreasing. In other words, they are a medical journal and people are buying fewer hard copies. So that was a problem. So the goal and objective was to increase sales. The critical success factor became increased revenue generated by online-only content website by 15% during the 2013 calendar year. The critical success factor was that the KPIs then became completion funnel percentage of funnel starts, completion percentage of funnel starts, and the percentage churn to call centers. How many people were abandoning that process and going to the call centers? The measures were all the various measures we have, and the metrics, and so on. Now the challenge we found was going from this critical success factor to these very valuable KPIs was difficult. It was a bit of a disconnect, and it wasn't so obvious. So what we did was we expanded the KPI Carta to include 4 new phases, or 4 new steps. The marketing phase, the audience, the strategy and tactic. And if we start by looking at the marketing phase, these are the things that are part of the overall customer marketing life cycle for any organization with their customers. The first phase we engage in is the acquire. We want to get a persuasive message out to as many people as possible. Secondly, we want to engage with them. We want to make sure that when we're delivering it, we're trying to target it to certain people to make it as meaningful a message as possible to attract them to gain and ask for more information. Then we want to convert them. We want to provide enough incentive and simplify the process to cause them to become customers. And once they're customers, we want to retain them. We want to ensure that we deliver on what we promised and that we keep them coming back. So those are the 4 phases in marketing. The audience, or often known as segmentation, is kind of the process of grouping customers together into logical groups of similar characteristics. And we do that because not everybody responds the same to every offer. And we also then are able to put people into personas or categories, and when we see someone else logging in or inquiring about something, and we see their qualities and that they share one of the groups, we may know how they're going to respond to our various offers. The strategy is sort of the what. These are decisions made to achieve the greatest overall value irrespective of immediate return. So these are more long-term visions, and they're timeless. The tactic is the how and the who. And these are things we do to achieve the greatest immediate value. These are day-to-day activities that are repeatable in the business. So they often change over time and with technology. So as an example, because a lot of people find it confusing to look at strategy and tactic, the strategy of an organization, let's say of a store, might be to engage customers in the stores to increase sales. The tactic in the year 1900 might have been to put up posters in the store promoting various deals. In 1980, it might have been to put up electronic screens updating specials, and in 2013, it might have offered a mobile website that was optimized for that, 4 square deals and customer service in a social media setting. So the strategy remained the same, but the tactics changed, and that's a good example of the difference between the two. So if we expand the methodology for this example, we look at the marketing phase. There are 4. I've put the other 3 in brackets, but we're going to look at convert. The audience we're going to look at for this international company is the international market, not the domestic. The strategy was to reduce the average time to purchase, and the tactic was to simplify the conversion funnel. So if we look at the expanded KPI Carta then, we have goals and objectives, which is to increase revenue, critical success factors, which was to increase revenue generated by online activity only by 15% in 2013. The marketing phase we chose was to convert. The audience was the international market. The strategy was to reduce the average time to purchase, and the tactic we would deploy to do that was to simplify the conversion funnel. Now the KPIs become very obvious, and we get a roadmap of how we arrived at those KPIs. So the KPIs now are the completion percentage of funnel starts, or the percentage churn to call centers. Again, the measures are all the various numbers in reports, and metrics is as we slice and dice them. So the great thing about this is it delivers a hierarchical structure of where those KPIs fit into the organization. And the word Carta means map in Swedish. And if we zoom up on this, we can see that the goal and objective was to increase revenue. The critical success factor in this case was to increase online-only revenue by 15% in 2013. The marketing phase was to convert. The market was international. The strategy was to reduce average time to purchase, and the tactic was to simplify the conversion funnel. And here then are the finished KPIs. So we get this map that shows exactly how these KPIs were arrived at. People are able to buy into the process. They understand how they were determined. And they also understand and can see that their work and their contribution to the organization has meaning, and that what they're doing as they do certain tactical things drives these KPIs, which in turn drives the corporate results. And we only looked at convert, but here are the other 4 phases, and of course we would fill in the entire Carta. And this can also be described as a spreadsheet. So a good KPI then must be a calculated number, one of the wrappers, must be comparable over time, and it needs to be suitable for the specific business, industry, or organization. All too often we see companies going out and just looking for KPIs and then selecting one, kind of wedging it into their business, but that's not the right approach. You want to instead look at the goals and objectives and start there. And it needs to be possible to influence the business. Thank you very much.